Hey guys, Jared here with RP Strength and Fitness. I just want to kind of give you a little bit more basic information about our youth training camp that we're starting next week. We've had several questions from people, a little bit more detail than what I put in the flyer. So just to give you some basics, the goal of this camp is to essentially introduce the fundamentals. I think when the youngsters get into like high school weights and things like that, sometimes the goal to progress faster can kind of supersede the desire to work on your technique or your movement pattern. So what we're looking at first is going to be those movement fundamentals. Do we squat well? How do we do our presses, our pulls, those kind of things. And so, we want to establish a good movement pattern first, talk about how to properly brace, which muscles we're supposed to be using or focusing on, those kind of things. Then we're going to move into our training kind of variations and the progression. So for example, with the squat, in a lot of schools, they'll do like a back squat. Sometimes they'll do a front or an overhead squat. So we want to talk about those variations and why sometimes your body needs to move a little bit differently, but really, there shouldn't be major changes. So an overhead squat, for example, can be very complicated with mobility, whether it's upper body mobility, shoulders, ankles, those kind of things. And so we need to be able to establish, what kind of minor changes in your body positioning might be needed for that, rather than throwing weights on, or even an empty barbell sometimes can be too much. Injury prevention. Again, that kind of goes hand in hand with proper movement. And so I tell people all the time, if you move well, progression is easy. It's just time, and it's just kind of getting your sessions in the gym. And so injury prevention means that you can't train if you're injured. And so we want to make sure that the movements that you're performing are going to be optimal for avoiding some of those things. And so, for example, in a squat, if your knees are caving in, whether it's in the bottom of the squat or coming up, those are things we want to avoid. Maybe it's your heels coming up off the ground and you're shifting your weight forward. Maybe your hips are shooting up a little bit early. So those are all things we want to tackle before we start adding any weight to the bar. Even the feeling and perception of what a light, a moderate, or even a heavy effort should feel like. Now, with this group, we're not going to be challenging them in the weights per se, but there are a couple movements that we can do where they can feel fatigue and feel in a safe way what it feels like to be 1 rep from fatigue, 2 rep from fatigue, 5 reps, etc. So we want to give them that idea and that understanding of what does it feel like, rather than just saying, here, let's see how much you can lift. And nutrition. Nutrition is obviously the foundation of many of these things. And as a youngster, sometimes they're not thinking about, what kind of foods are going to help build the body versus break it down. And so we're not going to go nuts on the progression in terms of nutrition stuff, but we want to give them the fundamentals. What helps us build our muscle, create strong connective tissue, those kind of things. In my opinion, there's not necessarily bad foods, but there's foods that maybe we shouldn't eat quite as frequently. And so we just want to touch base with the youngsters on that as well. So one of the keys of this whole thing is just to kind of establish a baseline for the young athletes, or just anybody aspiring to kind of get into working out. So that way they can go into the gym feeling confident and understanding that there are other people in the gym that won't be where they're at, whether it's maybe they're progressing faster, progressing slower, understanding that the things that they need to do are exactly where they are now, not necessarily where the person next to them is. And so we encourage you, if you have any child that's kind of interested in weight training or interested in learning about weights, to consider this group. If we fill up, then we might consider some additional ones in the future, or possibly if you can't make those dates and times, we'll do some one-on-one training to kind of catch them up. And then we will progress into a 2-day-a-week group after this, so that way they can continue throughout the summer, as well as potentially some homework, some suggested things that they can do on their own. So please reach out to us if you have any questions. Otherwise, let me know if you'd like to participate. Thank you.